Hello, friends. Our first talk will be by Swami Atmarupananda. Why Sri Krishna begins by teaching self-knowledge. Swami.
Namaste, good morning or good evening, depending on where in the world you are, or good night as well. I'm very happy to be here, and especially happy to be here with Swami Atmarupananda and with Pravrajika Brahmaprana. Mataji, Pravrajika Brahmaprana has done wonderful work in organizing workshops like this, which I have participated in the past. And it's always a pleasure to be back here in Dallas, to be with you, the devotees, and with Mataji and with Swami Atmarupananda, one of my, two of my dear friends. So let me begin as usual with a chant, and then we'll get into the topic. Om Parthaya Pratibodhitam Bhagavata Narayanena Swayam Vyasena Grathitam Purana Munina Madhye Mahabharatam Advaitam Ritavarshinim Bhagavatim Ashtadashadhyayinim Amba Tvam Anusandadhami Bhagavad Gite Bhavadveshinim. We salute you, O Mother Bhagavad Gita, you who were made known to Partha, Arjuna, by the Lord Narayana himself. You who were included in the Mahabharata by the ancient sage Vyasa. You, the goddess, who rains down the nectar of non-dualism in 18 chapters. You, the destroyer of relative existence. Om Shanti, 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 Harihi Om Tat Sat. Om peace, peace, peace be unto us all. When I say that prayer to a new audience, and some of you are a new audience for me, when I get to the line at the end of the prayer where it says, destroyer of relative existence, sometimes the thought comes, what will people think of a goddess who destroys relative existence? But that means destroys relative existence, destroys our ignorance, which causes us to see existence as relative, but opens to us the vision of the absolute, opens to us the vision of reality. So with our salutations to the Bhagavad Gita, who is addressed in this hymn as a mother, let me begin my topic. And so again, I'll begin with the pleasantries, but they are sincere pleasantries. My sincere thanks to the organizers, especially to Mataji and to Lakshmi, who is the technical expert helping with the technical aspects of this and helping in so many ways, with the trustees of the Vedanta Society of North Texas, who support this endeavor, and the wonderful work which has been put into developing this beautiful center in outside of Dallas in Irving, Texas. Again, I'm always deeply impressed with the quality of the work which has been put into developing this center over so many years. By Mataji and by the devotees. It's really a work of love, which has borne wonderful and beautiful fruit. And my warmest greetings to my dear friend, Swami Atmarupananda, whom I'm always delighted to share anything with, whether it's a stage or a phone conversation or an email or whatever. So it's a pleasure to be here with all of you. So the talk this morning, my first talk, is on why Sri Krishna begins his teaching to Arjuna with self-knowledge. Why does he begin with that? He teaches in the Gita, he teaches all of the yogas. But he begins by telling Arjuna that he is the divine self. He's not the body, he's not the mind, but he is the eternal, deathless Atman. And so let me say that when I first presented the topics for this, when Pravrajika Brahmaprana asked me for the topics for the different sessions, and I gave her the topics as you see in the program, she wrote to me an email and said, brother, you do realize that you're speaking on karma yoga, don't you? Because I had put self-knowledge as one, and bhakti as one, yoga as one, etc. I hardly mentioned karma yoga. And so I wrote back and said, yes, I am quite well aware that I'm speaking on karma yoga, but my talk will engage with the karma yoga of the Gita in relationship to all of the four yogas. Because the Gita, one of its beauties is that it, and not the only, certainly, but one of its beauties, one of its several outstanding beauties and unique beauties is that it is a work of extraordinary harmony. Swami Vivekananda himself said that in the Gita, Sri Krishna took the prevalent ideas in the society of his time, which was the late Vedic age. It was before the end of the Vedic age. It was the late Vedic age. Though the Mahabharata, as it has come down to us as a text, is post-Vedic, but the stories are from the late Vedic period. And so he took the ideas prevalent at that time and showed the harmony between the various ideas. And so it's a work of extraordinary harmony. He teaches the four yogas, and there are people who have said that the Gita is primarily a work on karma yoga. Yes, you can see it primarily as a work on karma yoga. There are others, like some of the commentators like Shankaracharya, who say that it's primarily a work of Jnana Yoga, the path of knowledge. And yes, you can look at it and interpret it as a premier text on the path of knowledge. There are others, many others, other commentators, great scholars, who present the Gita as primarily a text on the path of bhakti. And yes, you can present it as such. There are arguments that you can raise to show that the trend of the whole text is towards bhakti. There are not many who say that the text is primarily about Raja Yoga, but it certainly deals a great deal with Raja Yoga. And so one of its beauties is that it's a many-faceted jewel. And you can take a jewel and you can look at each facet and see the beauty of each facet. But the greater beauty of the Gita is that it is a jewel in itself. And so the facets all belong to the same text. And the analogy of a jewel with many facets breaks down because in the Gita, the ideas are so well harmonized that they're all interpenetrating each other. And so there are parts of the Gita where you can see that one yoga is predominant, other parts where another yoga is predominant, but you find them in great parts of the Gita blending together quite beautifully and harmoniously. So let me say, before I get into the actual question, which is why does Sri Krishna begin with self-knowledge, let me say something about the dynamics, the natural dynamics existing between the four yogas as described by Swami Vivekananda and as presented in the Gita. If you have the four yogas of Jnana, Bhakti, Raja, and Karma, or the path of knowledge, devotion, meditation, and action, you find that they fall into two pairs, Jnana and Bhakti, the path of knowledge and the path of devotion. Those are concerned primarily with our orientation towards reality. If my orientation towards reality is more the search for self-knowledge, who am I? And I'm looking for truth, I'm looking to know what is existence in itself, what is reality in itself, what is consciousness, who am I? Then I follow the path of knowledge. I'm seeking not a story, not a relationship, not to offer myself in love to God, but I'm looking for principle, a real principle, a living principle, experiential principle, but still principle, an impersonal reality. Impersonal in the sense that it's not a relationship I'm looking for. However, if I look on reality as personal, I'm seeking God, the beloved, that I as an individual want to devote myself to the beloved, to God, and find the Lord of the universe or the Mother of the universe, the reality at the heart of the universe and at the heart of me, but as a living consciousness that responds to me, that is, as a person. Then I follow the path of devotion. So I choose the path of knowledge or devotion depending on my conception of reality and my quest for that reality, whether I'm seeking principle or whether I'm seeking person. Vedanta says the two are the same, but my conception will determine which of those paths is dominant for me. The path of meditation or Raja Yoga and the path of karma or action or karma yoga, those are agnostic towards reality in this sense that it doesn't matter how you conceive of reality, because karma yoga and Raja Yoga are techniques. Raja Yoga is the path of controlling the mind. The idea being that the mind is the instrument of all experience. And if I can gain perfect control of the mind, then I have a perfect instrument of experience. And if the mind is completely calm, so that there's no disturbance in the mind is quiet, then I can perceive reality as it is, whether as person or as principle. That Raja Yoga says both are fine, because Raja Yoga is technique oriented, not presenting a particular view of reality. Karma Yoga the same. Karma Yoga is through non-attachment, through unselfishness, through motiveless action, I can become free in the midst of action, and so free that reality again reveals itself. Whether as principle or as person, it doesn't matter in Karma Yoga. And so that's important to understand as we go forward through these 2 days of discussion of Karma Yoga, because Karma Yoga being a technique like Raja Yoga, it can be harmonized with any of the paths, even with Raja Yoga. We have to, or it's good for us to remember that the Karma Yoga is primarily concerned with the means of practice, whereas Jnana and Bhakti are concerned primarily with the nature of reality. And the path in those two paths, or the practice in those two paths, is determined by the way that we conceive of the reality we are seeking. So let me say a few words about Karma Yoga itself, and again, I'm going to get to the question for today, this first session. Karma Yoga can be seen as a basic yoga, which anyone following any path of yoga, whatever, or any of the 4 yogas, will find that Karma Yoga is helpful. It may be in the background, it may be assumed. You may not be thinking I'm practicing Karma Yoga, but if you're following any of the 4 yogas, or any of the 3 other than Karma Yoga, you will also unavoidably be practicing something of Karma Yoga as well, and that will become clearer as we go. So we can see it as a basic yoga which underlies all of the yogas. Karma Yoga is also an everyday yoga. The path of meditation, that if that is your main path, that requires certain circumstances, that you have certain circumstances in your life, you maintain control of your activity, you watch the effect of your activity on your breath, your heartbeat, and so forth, in order to maintain perfect poise within your mind. And so you avoid certain circumstances, you seek certain other circumstances. And so Raja Yoga, if that is your main path, you have to regulate certain aspects of your life. Whereas Karma Yoga, whatever the circumstances of your life, you can follow Karma Yoga. And so karma yoga is everyday yoga. Bhakti yoga, you may emphasize at times of prayer and meditation and worship and so forth. Jnana yoga at times of self-inquiry and so forth. All of them you want to practice all of the time, but in the beginning you need certain circumstances. But karma yoga is one that you practice just in the midst of your everyday activities, whether you're washing dishes, cutting the grass, taking care of your kids, going to work, playing a game, whatever you're doing, in the midst of that, you practice karma yoga. So karma yoga is everyday yoga. And for karma yoga, even meditation is an action. And so even meditation is to be practiced from the standpoint of karma yoga. That we'll see later on what that is, or how that works. Even self-inquiry in the path of knowledge, that also is to be practiced from the standpoint of karma yoga. That is not worrying about the results, but just focusing on that which you are doing. And so that will become clearer as we go. So that's why karma yoga touches all of the yogas. And that is why in these 2 days, we will cover the 4 yogas and their relationship to karma yoga as found in the Bhagavad Gita. So the Gita is undoubtedly the greatest text, traditional text on karma yoga found in the Hindu tradition, or the greatest text I've found in any tradition on karma yoga. There's nothing comparable to the Gita until you come to Swami Vivekananda and his works, in particular his text Karma Yoga, which was actually, it didn't start as texts, it started, didn't start as a text, it started as lectures which were formed into a text. But until Swami Vivekananda's time, there's no text comparable to Karma Yoga, no text dealing with karma yoga comparable to the Bhagavad Gita. Though the Gita again deals with all of the yogas, it's not exclusively a karma yoga text as some have tried to make it. It is the greatest text on karma yoga. Even the great commentators, Shankaracharya, Ramanuja, Madhvacharya, and other great commentators on the Gita, even they didn't bring out the brilliance of Sri Krishna's karma yoga. They treated always karma yoga as a preliminary practice to purify the mind so that you could get beyond it to practice what they considered the real yoga, whether the real yoga be bhakti or jnana. So they didn't draw out the genius of Sri Krishna's karma yoga. And so that's why until Swami Vivekananda, I haven't found anyone who really understood the genius of Sri Krishna and his karma yoga, because all saw it through the lens of a traditional eye, which saw karma yoga just as something to purify the mind, and then you get on with the real business of spiritual life, which was not karma yoga. But that's not the way Sri Krishna teaches it in the Gita. He teaches it as a path itself, as did Swami Vivekananda. So now the question, why does Sri Krishna begin with the teaching Arjuna self-knowledge? The same question can be asked, and the same answer would be given if about Swami Vivekananda. Why was it that Swami Vivekananda gave so much emphasis, a primary emphasis to self-knowledge? Yes, he taught devotion. He taught Raja Yoga. He taught, and of course, he taught Karma Yoga. But in the midst of all of that, you find that Swami Vivekananda's unceasing emphasis on knowing who you are, knowing the self. And so in Sri Krishna also, he begins by teaching Arjuna self-knowledge. And again, this is tied to Karma Yoga, but let me go forward with this for a bit so that we can see why he would begin that way. And then he comes in partly in chapter 2, but more in chapter 3 and 4, etc. He emphasizes Karma Yoga more, but he starts with self-knowledge. So why is that? Let me start with the question, why did Swami Vivekananda emphasize self-knowledge so much? And then it will be easier to understand the Gita. The other disciples of Sri Ramakrishna, monastic and lay disciples, they had the same question. Sri Ramakrishna seemed to emphasize devotion, and he said that the path for the modern age is Naradiya Bhakti, Bhakti as taught by Narada in the Bhakti Sutras. And then they saw from reports and from his letters and from transcripts of his lectures in the West that Swami Vivekananda was teaching self-knowledge. In open forums, he would teach from the Avadhuta Gita, a text of extreme non-dualism, the type of text which Sri Ramakrishna didn't even allow most of his disciples to read. Only a rare one like Swami Vivekananda, he had them read such texts, Avadhuta Gita, Ashtavakra Samhita, etc. And yet Swami Vivekananda taught these teachings broadly and widely to people. So why? And then we'll come to the Gita. My understanding is, and again, this isn't what Swami Vivekananda said explicitly, but I think it's implicit in all that he taught and the way that he taught. Swami Vivekananda understood that the modern world was going to have to go through many very, very difficult times. And we're seeing some of those difficult times now, and we'll certainly see more difficult times as we go forward. He felt that with the coming of Sri Ramakrishna, the Satya Yuga, the golden age, was ushered in. But a new age doesn't come quietly. It comes with great turmoil. It comes with great destruction of the old before the new can begin to grow. And so Swami Vivekananda, from many indications in his conversations and teachings, you can see that he foresaw that there would be great difficulties in the modern world, that modern people would have to face, were facing and would have to face great changes in their lifetime, great disruptions. And again, my own feeling is, from studying Swami Vivekananda and modern times, is that we're just beginning to see those disruptions. There will be greater disruptions as time goes forward. And what gives people the strength to face such difficult times more than the idea that reality is within me? All power and all strength is inside of me. There is no death for me. If I have that idea that there is no death for me, that all power, all reality is in here, then it gives me the inner confidence and the ability to face the circumstances of life fearlessly. Maybe not immediately, it doesn't, but it gives us the potential ability to face life fearlessly. And as we go forward with those ideas, we find more and more from experience that, yes, I faced so many difficulties in the past, times when I thought I would be overwhelmed, and I wasn't. That I was always able to rise to the occasion, even when I thought that I would be lost. And so that gives me confidence that, yes, there is the power within me to rise to meet any circumstance, even death. Yes, death might come. It will come certainly, but it might come prematurely. But I have it within me to face that also. And especially if I know that I am the Atman, I am the divine self. So that's one reason why Swami Vivekananda started with self-knowledge and made that the basic platform of all of his teachings, even of devotion. Another reason is that he saw that around the world, people had been taught for thousands of years that they were weak, that they were insignificant, that they needed the help of some external God and the grace of some external God to save them. In some traditions, people were taught that they were sinners. In other traditions, they were taught that they were weak. But in all traditions, there was the emphasis, in all popular traditions, I'm not speaking of Advaita Vedanta, but that was not the religion of the mass of people in India, that in all popular traditions, people were taught to believe that they were weak, insignificant, and dependent on the grace of a God that they couldn't see. So Swami Vivekananda realized that that idea is taught to people. Children aren't born into the world with that idea. That's a world which, that's an idea which society has fed to people for millennia. It may be based on experience that we find that, no, I I don't know much. I don't have much power compared to the large universe around me, but still, it's an idea which is taught. And so he felt, and again, this is not what he says exactly, but it's an inference based on, or an implication based on his many, many teachings. And he does come close to saying it in these in similar terms. He felt that this other idea could be taught instead. If the truth is that you are the self, you are the Atman, this could be taught to people directly. And if that is the truth, then the problem is just manifesting it. Yes, people, as he says, might misunderstand it in the beginning, but in time they would come to understand it and learn to base their life upon it, just as people now have learned to base their life upon the idea that I'm a sinner, I'm weak, I'm no good, I can't do anything of myself, I have to be dependent on the grace of something outside of myself. So now let me come to and continue with the Gita. Why does Sri Krishna teach Arjuna self-knowledge at the beginning of the Gita? Look at the context of the Gita, the extraordinary context of the Gita, the battlefield. Where can you find a more dramatic setting, and a setting where the consequences of action are more final? It's a life and death situation. Life and death for you, and life and death for all of those that you are working with and those that you are fighting against. You're pitched in battle against those who are trying to kill you as you try to kill them. So what more dynamic and intense context could you imagine? When Jesus goes to teach the Sermon on the Mount, he calls his disciples to a mountaintop. A beautiful setting, perhaps there were some wildflowers blooming, and he tells them, blessed are the pure in heart, for they shall see God, blessed are the meek, for they shall inherit the earth, etc. On a beautiful setting. The Gita, how different is the setting of the Gita? On the battlefield, facing an enemy army, and a vast army, with a sea of soldiers from all over the known world at that time, even from Afghanistan, what at that time was still part of Greater India. From Benares to Afghanistan, there were soldiers who had come, kings and princes and soldiers who had come to fight. So this vast sea of humanity, and Arjuna, in the midst of that, sees his own kinsman and wonders, how am I going to kill these people? He knew before coming to the battlefield that he was going to fight with these people who were his kinsmen, but then it was conceptual. It was an idea. Now he's on the battlefield and he sees his kinsmen in front of him, his actual cousin brothers with whom he has grown up, his actual uncles, his actual gurus, his revered teachers. And these are the people he has to struggle to kill. And so he comes undone. So what is going to give him strength more than the knowledge that the self is deathless? That there's neither killer nor killed. You neither kill nor are you killed. The self is deathless. It's not cut by the sword. It's not wet by water. It's not dried by air. The self is untouched by anything in this world. What gives more strength than that? And look at Arjuna's state of mind. He's overcome with both fear and sorrow. He was the greatest warrior of his time, and yet he's overcome with fear and sorrow. Not fear so much that he was going to die, but fear that he would cause great harm, the undoing of society. And so in the midst of that, what is going to give him greater strength to act? So again, my topic is the path of karma yoga for this weekend workshop. So what gives the fearlessness to act and to confront actual situations in action than this knowledge that I am and the other is the deathless self? So Swami Vivekananda said that life can be defined as a struggle between a force inside of us and a force outside, which are struggling against each other. The force inside is trying to express itself, and the universe is pressing against us. And life is the battle between these two forces, my life force trying to express itself and the universe pushing in on me. And so life is the dynamic between these two forces. And as long as we can express ourselves, can act, then we survive. When the universe succeeds in pushing in on us, then we die. So life is problem solving from one standpoint. Different ways you can define life, but from one standpoint, life is problem solving. From the time we are born till the time we die, we're constantly presented with problems big and small. Most of life's problems are manageable, but every now and then we come to a problem which seems to be beyond our capacity. We fear that we'll succumb to it. We fear that this time I won't be able to. And so what gives us more strength than anything else? To act with effectiveness, to act with calmness, to act with awareness. Nothing does that more than the knowledge that I am the Atman. So Swami Vivekananda, again, taught this as the basis for all of life. Whether you choose the path of devotion or the path of knowledge or whatever path, this he wanted to make as the foundation of life itself, even for the fisherman, for the lawyer, for the student, for the doctor, for the beggar, for everyone. He wanted to make this knowledge of the self the foundation of action in society. And so Sri Krishna also made it the foundation of his teaching of the Gita. The second chapter, all through the Gita, he keeps coming back to self-knowledge. But the second chapter, the main theme is that. So if I know if I have this conviction in the divine self, if I know that all power is within, then I feel that I can face down the universe. I feel that death means nothing, failure means nothing. The samurai in Japan were taught the principles of Zen Buddhism for the same reason, so that they could be convinced that there is no death, so that they were not afraid of death. If a soldier has no fear of death, then they are the most formidable enemy. That's the way for a soldier to be the most formidable, is to be freed from the fear of death. Then you can go forward and act without knowing that even if the worst comes, that's okay, because I'm deathless. So again, that is why Sri Krishna made that the foundation of his karma yoga and his bhakti yoga and his raja yoga, this knowledge of the self. So let me end by my first talk by saying that Swami Vivekananda said that the second and third verses of the second chapter of the Gita express the essence of the spirit of the Gita. Now it's strange because these verses are not philosophical. They don't teach any great principles as we understand them about spiritual life. And yet Swamiji said that these are the essence of the Gita. And that's because they are the essential spirit of Sri Krishna's teaching. And they're also the essential spirit of Swami Vivekananda's own teaching. And they form the basis of Sri Krishna's and Swami Vivekananda's karma yoga. So those two verses I will quote and then try to translate from memory. I don't have them in front of me, but that is Kutastva kashmalamidam vishame samupastitam anarya jushtama swargyam akirtikaram arjuna. That's the second verse of chapter 2. Kutastva kashmalamidam. In this terrible situation, whence comes upon you this weak faint-heartedness, O Arjuna? It's an Arya Jushtam. It's unworthy of an Arya. It's unworthy of a noble person like you. It's aswargyam. It's not conducive to the attainment of heaven. So whence comes upon you this weak, mean, faint-heartedness? Shudram, hridaya dorabalyam. This weak faint-heartedness. Kutastva kashmalamidam vishame samupastitam anarya jushtamaswargyam akirtikaram arjuna. Klaibyam masma gama partha naitatva yupapadyate shudram hridaya daurbalyam tyaktotishta parantapa. O Arjuna, give up this weak faint-heartedness. Shudram hridaya daurbalyam. Give up this weak, mean faint-heartedness. Stand up and fight. So again, where's the philosophy? Where's the religion in that? Where's the devotion? Where's the jnana, the knowledge? But Swamiji said, this is the essence of the Gita. That is because it's based on Sri Krishna is calling to the divine self within Arjuna and saying, stand up and fight. And that's what we need even to face the ordinary problems of life. That spirit, which comes from the knowledge that I am the self. So with that, I'll close my first session.
So Swami, we have a couple questions here. Let me start with, is mindfulness towards any activity we do the basis of karma yoga?
Yes, that is mindfulness in the midst of action. Karma yoga can be practiced in several ways, as we will see as we go forward this weekend. But mindfulness is one of the foundations of karma yoga. Swami Brahmananda, who in his teachings, he usually emphasized things like japa and meditation and devotion and so forth. But he said that karma yoga begins with a deep respect for work itself. And that's what we develop through mindfulness. Karma yoga doesn't mean non-attachment in work, doesn't mean somehow get through it. I don't care. I'm not attached to my actions. I just do it and get it over with, get it out of the way. My mind is on higher things. I don't have to bother with these little things. I'm unattached. No, not at all. Karma yoga means a profound respect for activity because you know that every activity has the power to reveal the truth. As I'll say further into this weekend, karma yoga is the great laboratory of experience where we're experimenting with reality. That will hopefully be more clear when I get to it in the course of the talk. But in mindfulness, you showing respect for whatever it is that you do. In the midst of every action, if you can maintain mindfulness, mindful awareness of what it is that you are doing, you find that even the simplest activity has the power to bring a sense of inner beauty, a sense of inner calm, a sense of self-possession. And so mindfulness is one of the foundations of karma yoga.
So, Maharaj, we've got a few questions here. Let's see. Raja Yoga is presented as the path of controlling the mind. But according to Raja Yoga, who is this controller of the mind? Who is this subject who controls the mind? If we follow, in the second part of the question, if we follow Vedanta, it cannot be the self because it does not do anything. So he can neither be the controller of the mind.
Yes, no, that's true. As the questioner has basically answered their own question, which is the best type of question. And that is, the only thing the question doesn't supply is the obvious answer, and that is that it's the mind controlling the mind. It's the higher mind controlling the lower mind. As you know, in Vedanta and in Raja Yoga and the Patanjala Yoga, the mind is one thing, but the mind has different functions. So it has the function, it presents itself as the buddhi, it presents itself as the manas, it presents itself as the memory or chitta, it presents itself as the ahamkara. These are different functions of the one mind. And so one of the tasks in spiritual life, and this is mentioned in the Katha Upanishad and in the Gita as well, where in both scriptures it talks about merging the senses into the mind into the buddhi, and the buddhi into the self. one of the tasks in spiritual life is to develop the power of buddhi, to develop the higher mind. And one of the ways we do that is through controlling the lower mind. The lower mind here means the mind which is always thinking of different things, running after the senses. The manas, the Sanskrit term for the lower mind, is that part of the mind which coordinates our sense experience and which is sankalpa vikalpatmaka. It thinks about various things and doubts about various things. That's the nature of the lower mind. It's important to know, and I'm not going to go on for a long time. I'll make this the rest of this short, but it's important to know that when the buddhi is translated as intellect in English, that's a very poor translation. Because what is presently thought of as intellect in the West and in the English language is actually the educated manas, the lower mind, the educated lower mind, that which doubts, that which thinks about things and so forth. The buddhi is the higher, what's called determinative faculty, that which makes determination that, I know this is true. It's that which gives the stamp of truth, yes, of the definite knowledge. And so we develop the power of the buddhi. One of the ways, there's several ways, but one of the ways is by learning to control the lower mind. So that's what we're using to control the mind, the higher part of the mind.
Swami, is Raja Yoga simply the path of meditation or a combination of everything, since it has the yamas, niyamas, etc.?
Yes, is another good question. So it's interesting, and when I was doing my work on the complete works of Swami Vivekananda in India several years ago, which is where I came to know Swami Sarvapriyananda well, it was interesting to see that there's a passage in Swamiji where he describes the emblem which he developed, the symbol of the order with the serpent and the swan and the sun and lotus. In the actual Bengali, where he talks about it, he says that in the original, he mentions that the serpent of the yoga, he says that ties, yoga ties together and brings out the power of the other yogas. In the English, it was translated so that idea is completely lost. So that is in an introduction to say that, as I said about karma yoga is a basic yoga. It's the foundation of other yogas. But Raja Yoga also, Swami Vivekananda saw as a foundation for the other yogas, as he says clearly in this one passage, which unfortunately didn't come out in the English as it exists in the complete works at present, that Raja Yoga is the power of controlling the mind, and that we have to do whether we follow the path of knowledge or the path of devotion. Of course, in the path of knowledge, one can say and one can practice as a legitimate practice that I'm not the mind. Let the mind run on. Let it do what it likes, but I stand aside. But that takes tremendous strength of mind to be able to get to the point where you can say that. And so all of the yogas require that control of mind. So yes, Raja Yoga also is a foundational yoga.
Swami, how do we stay motivated in work when we are unattached and find it more attractive to stay with the Atman Brahman?
Yes, that will be the topic, I think, of, that'll be the topic of the next session, the second session. So I'll just say briefly now, because that's specifically what I'm going to deal with under the title of The Secret of Work. That yes, that is the main problem in understanding karma yoga, because we're told to be unattached and to act without any motive. And yet we can't act without motive. Everything that we do with a motive. I get up in the morning because of some motive. I eat because of the motive of hunger. I read a book because I want to read the book. I have some motive in mind when I do anything, and yet Karma Yoga tells us to be unattached and to act without motive, which seems impossible. So that we will address next time, next session.
Swami, is there any sequence of yoga to follow to realize the ultimate truth?
Yes, there is a sequence, and that is your own sequence. That is, we have to find that the yoga, which for us is our predominant yoga. Swami Vivekananda said, it's best to follow a combination of yogas, and that is true. Some people have an extreme temperament, and so they'll find that there's one yoga which is all that they want, all that they understand, all that motivates them, and that's fine. Let them go with that. Someone who wants jnana and nothing else. Some other who runs when they hear jnana being spoken of, runs away. They want bhakti and nothing else. Some want just to control the mind. But most people find that we need a combination. But your combination will be personal. It will depend on your own approach to God. Swami Vivekananda said that he was not against sects in religion, that is, denominations in religion. He was against sectarianism. He said, I would like sects to go on multiplying until every person is a sect unto himself. So first find out what your main approach is, what your natural orientation is, and then learn how to harmonize the other yogas with that. And as you go forward, you'll find oftentimes that your view of the path and of yourself as an aspirant will change, will evolve. And you'll begin to find that I used to think that this was important for me. Now I find that this is more important for me. And so that is the sequence that you will follow. Let your evolution guide you in the sequence of yogas as you find them. But try to find that. Look for that which is most meaningful to you, that which is most natural to you. Begin with that, and then the path itself will begin to reveal the sequence.
Swami, on the question of the mind, is it merging the mind in the self, meaning the cosmic mind, or the cosmic I, meaning the Brahman?
Excuse me. Merging the mind and it comes to the same. There are different ways of approaching, and while we're approaching reality or enlightenment or liberation, we can only deal in concepts, or we can deal in the question which pushes aside concepts like who am I, and refusing an answer, just who am I, and trying to pull back into the self and refusing any answer until we realize the infinite self. But otherwise, except for just that questioning state of mind, which is what Ramana Maharshi usually advised to people, other than that, in all practices, we have some sort of conception in mind. And even if we're questioning, we have some sort of conception, but it doesn't play a leading role because what's leading us is the questioning. And so one of the paths, and that's also one that Ramana Maharshi taught, Nisargadatta Maharaj taught, and which is from a traditional practice from the Upanishads. So it's an ancient practice, is holding on to the sense of I am. The sense of I am is the direct intuition of the Atman. The Atman doesn't say I am, but the sense I am is not the realization yet, but it is a direct intuition of the Atman, because the sense of I am comes from the silent Atman. The core of the sense of I am is the Atman. And so if we hold on to the I am, we try to merge ourselves into the I am, then we first come to the individual I am, but then we begin to find that the I am is cosmic. And then we keep following the I am until we come to the cosmic I am, and then that leads us to the silence, which is on the other side, which is the, as you could say, the inspiration of the I am, the source of the I am, but which itself is beyond even the sense I am.
Swami, if one gets paid for their work, can it still be karma yoga?
It better be, because most people need to get paid for their work. So yes, as I often tell people when this topic comes up, we should learn to work not for the fruits of our action, But for the sake of the work itself, and this will be part of next session's topic, so I won't develop it much here. I'll just say that, and I'll repeat it again next session probably when I come back to it. Not working for the fruits of your action doesn't mean that at the end of the work week you go to the boss and the boss the boss comes to you and says, well, you haven't come to get your check, your paycheck. I've got it ready for you. It's on my desk. Come on in and I'll pay you for the week. And you say, oh, no, I'm not working for the fruits of my action. I'm working for the work itself. The boss will be delighted, but you're going to have a hard time paying your bills and supporting yourself or family if you have a family. So no, you working without motive and without attachment doesn't mean that you don't accept pay for your actions. It means that that's not where your mind is, that you know that there's something else you're getting from the work which is more important, but you still accept the payment.
Swami, how important is it to have an ishta, a chosen ideal? And in the absence of an ishta, how can we approach meditation and make it effective?
Yes, that also is a good question, and it is a question that many people have, because many people have trouble either deciding on an ishta or with the very idea of having an ishta, and that's okay. For some people, the ishta comes very quickly in their spiritual life. They have an immediate attraction, or it just seems natural, and they just that's not a much of a search for them. They just find the ishta, that's what they want, and that's what they practice. There are many others, and particularly in the West, but it happens in India as well, but much more common in the West, where people don't even grow up with the idea of an ishta, and with deities all around them for them to choose from, or a family deity or anything like that. It's much more common that people have trouble with the very idea of having an ishta and of settling on an ishta. And it can seem to many of us like sort of an artificial process. You feel like sort of someone who goes to buy a bride, a man who goes to buy a bride, and you go to the bride bazaar, and there are all these women there, and you're expected to buy one to be your life's partner, and it's too artificial for life to happen like that. But the ishta, if you don't feel an immediate attraction to an ishta, don't worry about that. There is God. There's God, Ishvara in the Indian tradition. Just then try to focus on technique more, whether it's karma yoga or raja yoga, where you're just developing in Raja Yoga, developing the power of your concentration, calming the mind, calming the senses, etc. Karma Yoga, learning to work unselfishly. Or you can turn to Jnana Yoga, where it's more oriented towards self-knowledge. Who am I? In time, most people, even those who are not attracted to an ishta or even to the idea of an ishta, most people in time find evolving within themselves a connection to an ishta. If you don't, then it's either not yet necessary for you or it's not necessary for you at all. So my best advice is that you not worry if you don't feel an attraction to an ishta and you don't know who your ishta is. Give yourself time and work on other things. Work on Raja Yoga or on Karma Yoga or on both, or on the path of knowledge. Let your path grow within you. And of course, if you have a teacher whom you respect, whether a formal teacher or an informal teacher, but someone who you know is wise and interested in your welfare and not laying a trip on you, as we used to say, then you can get help from them. Sometimes it's helpful to talk it out with a wise friend or a spiritual guide.
Swami, one of our attendees asks, I have always been fascinated by Jnana Yoga and I'm naturally attracted to self-inquiry, but I think it makes me hard, and I am now being led to Kriya Yoga and find it makes me softer and open to love. Is it okay to study and pursue both the Jnana Yoga and Kriya Yoga?
Certainly you can combine such paths. What I would warn, however, is not, my warning is not don't do it. My warning is that when you take two things like jnana and kriya, or you take jnana and bhakti, or jnana and raja, or jnana and karma, whatever, always find a meeting point between the two. What you don't want to do is have part of your life going this way and part of your life going that way. You want to go this way. You want to go together. So when you combine modalities, the spiritual modalities, two different modalities, find a point of harmony between them so that you can see that both of them are leading you in the same way. Don't go like this. Be sure that you're not doing two different, that you don't have the feeling and the effect of doing two different things.
Swami, we just have 1 minute left. The last question is, Karma Yoga is often described as the path of selfless action. Is it possible to be truly selfless while one is still identified as a doer?
That's also a very good question. In a complete sense, no, it's not possible. But we can develop a deep sense of unselfishness, a deeply effective degree of unselfishness, even when we still feel ourselves to be the doer, and that's the way we start. None of us start being a non-doer, but being free from agentship. We all start with the sense of being a doer, an agent. And so part of the task of karma yoga is to go beyond that. But that is a path. That's a spectrum. You go from being selfish and sort of a hard-shelled agent that I am the doer and I am responsible and this is me and so forth, till you begin to soften the shell of your ego and identity. You become more permeable, more open to the world around you, more unselfish. Until the time comes when that is perfected. But that, of course, is at the heights of spiritual life. So it's a graduated spectrum, as everything else in spiritual life.
Thank you, Swami Atmarupananda.